Happy New Year and welcome to another round of Science Vocabulary. For this unit, we're going to have three sections of Science Vocabulary, the first of which is population controls. For the population controls, we're going to include the term ecosystems in this vocab set so that we have all of the vocabulary put into the context of the unit that we are proceeding into. Make sure that you have all of these words in your science vocabulary spreadsheet. You have marked down what you think the words mean, as well as if you've seen the word before or not. Do not use Google to predefine the words. If you're using Quizlet, then make sure that you have those words put into a separate column, as we've described earlier in the class. And just be thinking, have thought about all of these words before we begin with the definitions, which we're going to do now. So pause this and make sure that your spreadsheet is complete, and then we can start moving through this. Thank you. All right, our first terms are going to be biotic and abiotic, which are two parts of an ecosystem. The biotic parts of an ecosystem are going to be all of the living things that are inside of that ecosystem space. These are not just going to be limited to plants and animals, but actually include all living things. I have listed all of the living kingdoms that we think about regularly. So protists are the single-celled organisms that are similar to plants, animals, and fungus. Viruses are included here, even though viruses aren't specifically living unless they're inside of a host cell. Bacteria are biotic factors. Plants, animals, and fungus, obviously, biotic factors. The abiotic factors are going to be the parts of an ecosystem that are non-living, but do support the life that exists inside the ecosystem. This will be all of your nature things, so water, soil, sunlight, air quality, weather, which I grouped into the air, and then what is contained inside the water and contained inside the soil, which is described as minerals. So you're going to have all of the dissolved minerals in the water, all the minerals that are carried in the soil. And that's going to be some of your abiotic factors. Other things could include elevation from sea level, distance from the equator, or latitude. Those would be abiotic factors as well. If you change your biotic factors or if you change your abiotic factors, then you're changing the ability for an ecosystem to support life. Those changes are called limiting factors. So limiting factor is going to be a change in biotic or abiotic factors, and the limit of life in an ecosystem is called the carrying capacity. So the carrying capacity is going to be the limit of an ecosystem to support an organism living there, or a group of organisms living there. The part of an ecosystem where an organism is going to be most successful is called its niche. A niche is going to be specific to the organism. It's going to be its easiest place to live. It's going to be where it's most successful. For example, you've got these birds that are called warblers. These birds, these three different types of warblers, are able to live in three different parts of a tree. And so the part of the tree that particular species of warbler is existing inside of and being successful, that would be its niche. These three, although they're living in the same tree, they're not competing with each other for resources because their niches are different from each other. Same thing with these birds over here. They're all living at the beach, but they are being successful in different parts of the beach due to them occupying different niches within that ecosystem. Now we have levels of organization. We've got levels of organization inside of living things. We've got levels of organization that exist between living things. To take this back to 7th grade, your basic unit for life is a cell. And then if you have a group of cells together, then that's a tissue. Tissues that all exist to perform the same function are called an organ. And then organs that all work together to perform a task are organ systems. And then all the organ systems working together will form an organism. If you have an organism that you're speaking about, then that particular organism would be called a species of an organism. So we don't want just an animal, we want to have an elk. And so we'd have this big deer called an elk, and that would be the species that we're talking about. Now, if you have a group of that organism, a group of that species, then that's called a population. So your populations could be a group of the same species that exist inside of an area. If you have several different species existing inside the same area, then that's a community of species, or a community of populations. So a group of a species is called a population. If you have several populations in an area, that's a community. And then all of the communities of organisms and the abiotic factors that they exist within would be describing an ecosystem. A group of similar ecosystems, to go back all the way to sixth grade, would be a biome, and then all the biomes on Earth would be the biosphere. Now, that organization system, that's called a hierarchy. So a hierarchy is just going to be a system of organization from specific to more general, or from less important to more important, from least to most, to describe something. For example, the other day I was watching the Winter Classic, and because I like hockey, and periodically I watch hockey. I wouldn't say that I follow hockey anymore, but I'll watch it once or twice a year at this point in my life. My team has always been the Buffalo Sabres, and so the hierarchy of existence for the Buffalo Sabres would be that they are a team in Division C of the Eastern Conference of the National Hockey League. And so that would be from most specific to most general for that particular hockey team. That would be its hierarchy of existence. We are humans. So I'm Mr. Lester. I am a member of the species human. When we come together as a class, then we are a population of humans in the same room. We're existing inside of that room, which would be our ecosystem for the time. The other organisms there are like my little plants on the side and whatnot. That would be the community of organisms that we live with. A hierarchy. Now, the number of different organisms in an area is the biodiversity. So you can have a high population in an area. For example, this golf course has a very, very high population of grass. All of the grass is the same. So this has a very high population, but it's all of the same organism. So it has a very low diversity. Over here in this coral reef, you have many different species of organisms, different populations of those species, all existing in the same space. So this is many different species, many different populations inside of this ecosystem. This is going to have a high biodiversity, especially compared with your golf course. That's our last term for population control. So we can describe populations inside of an ecosystem now. We can describe limits on populations as affecting the carrying capacity. I would recommend you take a moment and listen to this video once more straight through before proceeding to part 2 of vocabulary. Thank you, and I hope that you have a good unit in science.